Welcome to the King's Table podcast, everybody. I am honored to have Vivek Ramaswamy with us, candidate for President of the United States. Welcome to the podcast, Vivek.
It's good to be on, man. How are you?
I'm really good, man. Thank you so much for being here. I want to just get right into asking you questions. We really want to value your time.
Thank you.
I guess as we start, kind of just giving you a few minutes to explain, who is Vivek Ramaswamy and why does he want to run for President of the United States?
So I'm an entrepreneur at heart, but I'm somebody who has had a lot of pursuits in my life. My parents came to this country 40 years ago with no money. In a single generation, I've gone on to found, thankfully, multiple successful companies and did it while marrying my wife, Apurva. She's a surgeon here at Ohio State. She's a throat surgeon, raising our two sons who are 3 years old and 1 year old, and travel on the campaign trail with us quite a bit, which has been a fun, interesting journey. I started my first business. It was a biotech company that I built. It's a multi-billion-dollar business today that I led as CEO for 7 years, and 5 of the medicines I worked on are FDA approved today. I started another business called Strive that competes with the likes of BlackRock and State Street and Vanguard by offering index funds, but with a different approach to voting and to shareholder engagement, telling companies something radical. Focus on your products and services for profit rather than on other unrelated social agendas. And that's been, thankfully a success, and crossing over $1 billion in assets under management within a year or so of its first fund launching. I've started a number of other businesses too. Another one's called Chapter in the Medicare Advantage space, and a range of other businesses. But that was my life, driving change through the private sector. I ended up stepping down from my job as a biotech CEO, though, to offer a pointed criticism of the politicization of business. And I wrote what ended up being 3 books on the back of that. Woke Inc. was the first, and then 2 more that came after, Nation of Victims and then Capitalist Punishment. But I realized that I was only going to drive so much change through writing books, even through starting businesses. I think the bigger vacuum in our country was this deeper hunger for purpose and meaning, especially in our generation, if I may say it. I think that I saw a lot of other politicians and Republican candidates criticizing the poison that fills that void, but without filling that void with a vision of our own. And, through a long journey that led Apurva and I to decide that the right way to revive this country was for a different generation, a new generation of leadership to actually lead us to a positive vision of what it means to be an American. And that's what this whole campaign has been all about.
I love it. And actually going down that line, I think us as entrepreneurs, I think for me personally, I've never really followed a campaign as closely as I have yours. I think there's just something about following an entrepreneur that is just attractive to us. And I think the question I would ask is, how and why should leaders in business or non-politicians get into politics, knowing that, media, and you've gone through this yourself, is media, the other side are just, it's so easy for people to get ripped apart. Accusations are made, all those kinds of things. And some of our brightest minds are sitting on the sidelines and would rather sit there than to expose themselves and their families through all the hell of this, let alone the financial costs. But what would you say, and how would you encourage more business leaders to get more involved in politics and shaping our country's future?
Well, I think that, I would say encourage in one sense, but it's got to be organic, right? If it's a box checking thing, then it's almost better that you drive positive change in other ways. I think you have to feel called to do it. And so I struggle with this one because I do think that our country would be better off if we had more people like those on this call or in your listener base or otherwise who took time in public service. I just think strictly the country would be better off if we did. But that's only true if it is actually something you feel organically called to do. So in a certain way, I hope that the way I'm best able to impact that result is by being successful here and setting an example that, yes, this can be a painful process. And yes, there's a lot of reasons why you're going to give up things to do it. But on the other side of it, it's not, first of all, it's not as It's not as bad as they make it out to be if you approach it with the right spirit. But the second thing is, we're not going to have a country left, actually, if we each assume that this is somebody else's problem. The government, I'm not interested in the government. I mean, even Apurva, my wife in particular, she's good at what she does. But even me, first generation immigrant family, you're trained with a certain mindset. Put your head down, work hard, get ahead, do positive things, productive things, all that dirty politics, that's for somebody else. And the fact of the matter is that I think many entrepreneurs might learn this lesson the hard way. You might not be interested in the government, but the government's interested in you. You might not be interested in politics, but politics is interested in you. And I think that waiting for this to be somebody else's problem to solve is something that once you've achieved a certain level of success, you think about what inheritance you want to give your kids. Is it a bunch of green pieces of paper in a country where those green pieces of paper literally cease to mean something? Or is it the inheritance of a country where they can live that same American dream that you did? And Apurva and I made our choice. And I think hopefully in ways that, demonstrate through example, hopefully the example of success, we're able to say that, if you're a parent of kids and an entrepreneur, et cetera, that's great. But there's a higher purpose for recreating or reviving a country that allowed not just one of you, but millions of you to be able to do the same thing. And if you don't, then we're at risk of losing that permanently.
I love that.
Maddie?
It's good. Vivek, I know you've really shown something that other candidates haven't shown, which is doing your campaign a little bit differently. And I know we got a lot of business builders on here, a lot of brand builders, a lot of people that are really trying to get their mission and their message out to more people. And I think we can all agree, right? Attention is that new currency nowadays. And your approach to your campaign is something that I personally have been following and very intrigued by. Get more eyes and ears on your message, your mission. Can you tell us a little bit more about your campaign strategy and the reason for this approach, and maybe how you feel like it's working for you based on your own expectations and what's actually playing out as a result?
Yeah, look, I think that given that I'm an outsider in the realm of politics, I've really brought this approach to bear on the campaign. Certainly, I think the campaign's been at its best, and we've been at our best when I've done this, and maybe not at our best when we've abandoned it. But everything's an experiment, really, right? If you're just doing something the tried and true way, you become a plastic, hollowed out husk of yourself. And, I think if you're willing to say, here are my true convictions, I'm going to share them in an unvarnished way. I'm going to do it in a particularly forward way that involves some risk, and it's an experiment. Not sometimes is that a risk of being misunderstood or a risk of having backlash? Yes, there is. Is there a risk that occasionally, 1 out of 100 times, you're even going to change your own mind after you hear a better argument? Yes, there is. But we're human beings, and I think that we want our nation to be led by human beings like us. I think you want somebody who is willing to share his convictions even in the face of criticism, somebody who in the face of better facts is open to changing their mind on an issue. You don't want somebody doing that all the time, but somebody who actually in the rare circumstance where that happens, yes, those are risks. Those are very different than the way traditional politicians do it.
Right.
And I think that that's something that has helped this campaign, at least so far. I think we're seeing something happen in the latter part of this campaign that I'm a little worried about, not so much for this campaign, but for the country, where now the mega dollars are really starting to flow in from the institutionalized Republican circles. Yeah, I think the super PACs, I'm increasingly convinced, are a cancer on American politics. We're not playing that game. And so the bet we're making is, look, I don't begrudge anyone who wants to support us at whatever scale they want to, in whatever way they want to in the campaign or whatever the way this goes. But I think that there are a lot of candidates who dance to the tune of special interests as a way of raising money, and it's effective. And money is effective at buying airtime, literally, and advertising on TV and radio and otherwise. And that becomes a tougher thing to compete against. I've lived the full American dream. We've invested immense resources from our family's perspective, certainly into this campaign, over 16 plus million bucks. Whatever the number is, maybe higher than that. But that's still modest in comparison to the hundreds of millions, soon to be billions, flowing through super PACs with special interest funding and propping up others who will be circus monkeys for those special interests, which I refuse to be. And so my bet is that's going to be a successful strategy. But I am worried that the distortions that you see in American politics are a product of these special interests that I don't think are good. And I think that that's something I intend to change if I'm successfully elected. But in the meantime, frankly, we're going to need the support of like-minded patriots across the board. I mean, the max somebody that can traditionally give to a campaign is $3,300 to the campaign in the primary and $3,300 in the general. It's a lot of money to a lot of people, but it's not enough to buy off a politician. It's enough to support one. The super PAC game is a whole separate story, but and I think it's a bad influence on American politics. But in the meantime, through the traditional system, other than me, who can give an unlimited amount to the campaign, everybody else is capped out at $3,300 in the primary and $3,300 in the general. You can give $6,600 up front. Frankly, if there's successful creators on this call, et cetera, whatever the max amount is, somebody is able to. I'm going to ask you to do it. And I used to be very shy about that. I'm not shy anymore for two reasons. One is we have a clear path to victory. And I was going to wait to ask people for serious money before I knew we had a clear path to win. But the second is it is necessary to work this way to compete against the way the Republican donor establishment otherwise traditionally works. And if you want to break that system, it's going to take, I think the best thing you could do is enter public service and see if you're willing to donate a few years of your life to bring competence to the realm of actually being a governor, a mayor, a president, whatever it is. But short of that, I'm going to ask you for your help. And if everybody is willing and able, who's willing and able to do it, if it's $1, it's $1. If it's $6,600, then let it be $6,600. That puts me in a position to break that system. And one of the things I've learned slowly and gotten comfortable with in the last month or two is getting over the initial reluctance that a guy like me began this process with. I don't have that reluctance anymore.
Love it.
Fighting for the future of the U.S. You can't be afraid to ask if you're really fighting for the future of the U.S.
We will not be shy.
Your comment about not having a country left, there's a lot of there's a sense of urgency around that. So I appreciate that. On that note too, talking about the 3,300 and getting everyday Americans involved. My audience, our audience, is primarily small business owners, real estate investors, or many of them aspiring to be. And I'll say this first, like I believe in the free market and everything else, and would love for the government, not to get too involved. But my question, it's getting harder and harder to compete with large corporations. And we look at rising costs, taxes, the healthcare costs, insurance costs, and specifically for, small businesses and the employees around that. And obviously their costs rising, wage growth not keeping up with really the cost of inflation and everything else. And with your background in business, I'm just curious, when we look at all of this, what are some of your ideas to help in these areas? And how do you propose to navigate that? Like you were just talking about, the big donors and the behemoth behind all of this. Like, how do you navigate through the gauntlet of like career politicians and try to get agreement around some of these, or get some bipartisanship in some of this?
So my view is, I don't even view this through partisan lenses, not really. I don't think the real divide in this country is between black and white, as the media would teach you to believe. But I don't even think it's between Democrats and Republicans. I think it's between, rarely do you hear me just Biden bashing gratuitously, or, I disagree with a lot of what he's done to this country, and I think it's awful, but I don't think that it is productive to sit there and bash one party over another when the Republican Party has plenty of failings within itself. And the real divide in this country, I think, is between an overwhelming majority of Americans who share our national values: meritocracy, the pursuit of excellence, free speech, open debate, the rule of law, self-governance over aristocracy. These are controversial ideas to some, but most of us in this country share those basic values in common: black, white, red, or blue. It doesn't matter. And then there's this fringe minority that I do think happens to have the Democratic Party in a chokehold, but in terms of people in this country, it's a fringe minority that rejects the founding ideals of our country, that believe that your genetics determine what you can achieve in life, that believe that group quotas are the right way over meritocracy, that censorship's the right way over free speech, that anti-Americanism and American apologism is better than American exceptionalism. And I reject that, but that's the real divide. And so I see the prism that way. What I see this campaign as being is really a pro-American movement that's using the Republican Party as a vehicle to advance our agenda. And I do think that being here from a different generation helps. I mean, I'm 38. I'm the youngest person ever to run for U.S. president as a Republican. I'd be the youngest president ever elected if elected. I think we have to reach the next generation with an actual vision of what it means to be an American, rather than in the 2023 partisan bickering of tug of war. And people wonder, well, why is it that you see such fissures within the Republican Party and within the Democratic Party? But then we're also partisan between Republicans and Democrats. It's that that's the wrong way to look at this, actually. It's between the managerial class and the everyday citizen. That one you show up a lot in the Republican Party, the Republican establishment and otherwise. It exists in the Democratic Party. But then it's this broader anti-American current across our institutions that, 10% of the population is somehow professing to represent 50% of the population. And I just don't think that that's true. So that's a long way of saying I am optimistic about uniting this country, but it will take a leader who's not just a partisan hack to actually do it. It's part of the reason that I don't say everything the way that Republican politicians traditionally do, and that gets me in trouble with the Republican establishment. But good news is, at least if the system works as it's supposed to, it's not that establishment that decides who's running the country. It's the voters of this country. And I think that's going to work in our favor. It's
the voters. So, well, Vivek, I just want to say thanks again for being here as
Appreciate
we have a few more questions as we're going through. So I'm out in Austin, Texas. And so many of our listeners that came in with my people, I've got a couple 100,000, real estate agents, real estate investors that'll be tuning in and learning about this. And I spent just a lot of time in the last couple of days watching videos and seeing the town halls you've been doing as kind of some homework to prepare for this. And it's been a really impressive couple of days. And I would encourage our listeners to go back and do it too, because we're only going to be able to hit a few more questions today, I'm sure. But make sure you continue to do your homework as we help push this out here. My question is digging into, so over the last 18 months, the Fed has raised interest rates at an unprecedented, speed, unprecedented amount comparable to maybe, early 80s, right? And industries are slowing down from it, but the one industry that's hit harder than any others is the real estate industry.
Yep.
Where transactions and volumes are down at a fraction, and mortgage lenders and brokers and everyday real estate agents are hurting. And some investors that are like good, smart investors have been put out of business because of what happens when those rates happen and those lines of credit change. So I'd like to understand from you, how do you feel about the way they're attacking that? And what do you think the president's role should be in that? Because it's kind of set up in a way where the Fed isn't supposed to be controlled by the presidency, but is that right? And what could the president do, or what could you do in this process?
Yeah, so the Fed is badly broken. And I think that part of what we need is to restore the true purpose of what a limited purpose is for the Federal Reserve: stabilize the US dollar as a unit of measurement. So there's this myth of the Phillips curve that says there's a trade-off between inflation and unemployment. It's based on old British data from New Zealand. It's flawed. But anyway, this is a long story. The Fed basically started to try to play God from on high. That was a mistake. And what I think the Fed should be doing instead is stabilizing the dollar against a basket of commodities. That would avoid it jerking in either direction, interest rates too quickly in one direction or otherwise. I'll give you one example of that flawed Fed philosophy at work. Is that, okay, I'm trying to think about how to simplify this, but basically, the Fed has taken wage growth as a leading indicator of inflation. So first of all, that means they play whack-a-mole when wages go up. That's part of why real wages haven't gone up for the bottom 99% in this country over the last 25 years. But put that to one side. It also means that anybody who runs a business knows that wages are the last thing to go up in a business cycle. So when the Fed treats wage growth as a leading indicator of inflation and tightens monetary policy, raises interest rates, but wages are actually a trailing indicator of inflation, or a trailing indicator of the business cycle, what they're doing is they're tightening monetary policy right into a natural downturn of the business cycle itself, which is a double whammy. That gives us financial crises. It's what we saw in 2008. And I see a lot of the mistakes we've made in the last year fit that same description. And so what you described is a problem, but it's a symptom of a deeper hubris of the Federal Reserve that we need to eliminate. And one of the ways to do it is employee headcount reductions. I mean, part of the problem is when you have a bunch of people showing up to work who should have never had that job in the first place, they find things to do. that they shouldn't have been doing. So there's 23,000 some odd people that work in the U.S. Federal Reserve System today. I only need less than 10% of that to stabilize the dollar as a unit of measurement. That's a 90% headcount reduction. And that's what I'm bringing to much of the federal bureaucracy, mass headcount reductions. 75% overall headcount reduction in the number of federal bureaucrats by the end of my first term. That's how you actually drain the swamp. And you also want to talk about addressing the national debt. I want to start with zero-based budgeting. Start with zero as the baseline and ask what's necessary rather than starting with last year's budget and then asking how you tinker around the edges. And so in so many ways, I do think it's time to have a CEO in the White House. Yeah. But that means by definition, it's not going to be somebody that has traditional political experience. And I personally think that's a good thing. I think most Americans do too. But I'm the only candidate in this race that has that to offer. And that's why I'm asking for everybody who especially is from like-minded background to help support us get there.
You know, Vivek, I think one of the things I love about your campaign and your communication process is you really are clear about what a president can and cannot do. And I think a lot of these career politicians, it's very easy to be rhetorical when no one is fact checking you. And there's such a big, you know, when an average voter is electing someone, you can get caught up in all this rhetoric language and not really know what the president can and cannot do. So I'd love to give you an opportunity to maybe communicate. And you do a really artful job of doing this in all of your content online. So I don't want, you know, we don't have to go there. But like, what can a president do very specifically and what can a president not do, and kind of set the record straight for the average listener?
Yeah, and this is a good question to maybe get close to wrapping on, actually, because this is getting to the meat and potatoes of why the presidency is important. Mm-hmm. So the president runs the executive branch of government. The president can't make laws on his own. I favor a 12% flat tax across the board. Ordinary income, capital gain, estate tax, corporate, doesn't matter. Across the board, 12% flat tax. I can't do that without Congress. However, what I can do as the U.S. president is shut down the bureaucracy in the executive branch that's making a lot of the unconstitutional regulations that never passed Congress. And most of the regulations affecting businesses, both large and small, come from the executive branch that Congress never passed in the first place. So that much I can do. Opening up drilling, fracking, using coal, using nuclear energy, that much I can do. Reducing the federal employee headcount, fixing the budgeting process, that much I can do. Securing the borders of this country in my capacity as commander-in-chief, that helps end a wave of crime and other problems across this country, even poverty and homelessness, that much I can do. Ending race-based quota systems in the federal contracting process, which bleeds much into the rest of the private sector. Restoring meritocracy in this country, that much I can do. So those are the things I've made the top of my presidential campaign, not because they're the most, just because they're the most important things, though I think they're very important. But it's also what I know I can do without asking Congress for permission or for forgiveness versus making a bunch of false promises that I couldn't tell you if I could keep or not if it depends on 500 people in Congress. And so the good news right now, though, is that those problems that the president can address are also the problems that help unlock our economy and revive our national identity. Right. And so this is a special moment. And we have a Supreme Court right now that agrees with me 6-3 on everything that I'm telling you, that is within the scope of duties of the U.S. president. This is our moment to revive our country for the next generation. And, you know, we're taught to believe that we're somehow in decline. I don't think we have to be in decline. I think we can still be in our ascent. But that is a choice. It's not going to be automatic. It's a choice that we make. And, you know, I really mean this. I think we're going to ask people across this country to do their part. Apoorv and I, we will do ours. And I truly believe that, you know what, 20 years from now, I don't think we have a country left if we just passively sit on our hands and watch it decay. But it doesn't have to stay that way. We're in a window where we can get this right. We're in a window where we can revive our national identity, revive national pride in this country. And if we seize that moment now, then yes, I do have confidence that our best days can still be ahead of us. And that's the choice I'd like for us to make. And that's why we're in this race.
I love it.
So, Vivek, where can we point people? So we have a two-part question. How much more time do we have with you? We have a few more minutes, and or where can our listeners go help? Right. So you've talked about.
I'll time for one more question and then we can wrap up. Yeah.
Cool. And then where do we send them if they want to be able to invest?
We would love for people to back us in whatever way they can, right? So if people have more time than money, volunteer with us. That's hugely helpful. Busy entrepreneurs building your businesses totally understand that. Now the financial raise really makes a difference, especially in this fourth quarter. Go to Vivek2024.com, Vivek 2024.com, and give whatever the maximum is you're comfortable with. The max amount you can give totally is $6,600 for those who are able to do it. If it's that maximum or something lower than that, but whatever the maximum is you're able to, we're going to ask you to do it. And I think we're in a window now where I know we can do this. We just need your help too. As I said, decline is a choice. We don't have to choose decline. We can be a nation that's still in our ascent. And I think it's going to take somebody from the next generation, somebody whose best days, I hope, are still yet ahead in life, to see a country whose best days are still ahead. And I think they can be, but we're going to ask for your help. It's Vivek2024.com, Vivek 2024.com. And if you're willing to support this campaign, it means a lot to me. And we will not let you down. Apoorva and I will do our part.
Love that.
Maddie, you want to ask one more question?
Yeah, we'll ask one more because I love how you approach your passion and purpose for our country as a patriot, but I also love your passion and your purpose behind your family and the partnership you have with your wife and your kids. All of us have many kids and in marriages on this call, and many of our listeners do. And one of the questions that we often get with this being a wealth building, a financial freedom based podcast and community is really talking about the younger generations and some of maybe the indoctrination and some of the negative things that we're seeing in our education system. And I'm curious on your thoughts on, how can our education system start promoting financial literacy, entrepreneurship, these applicable life skills that actually matter today instead of some of this indoctrination, this woke agenda, and really just a lot of the outdated, archaic learnings that we're seeing. What are your thoughts around that? And maybe where does that start in your own household?
So look, I think that much of what you see in the educational system right now in the indoctrination of wokeness, it is a deflection tool. They're blowing woke smoke for their own failure to do the thing that they were supposed to do. So, they closed those schools over the last few years during the COVID pandemic. Well, what did they then start saying? Math is racist. No, 2 + 2 = 4, and that's not racist. But what might be inequitable is failing to teach those kids in the inner cities how to do math, but somehow in the private schools, COVID doesn't affect kids and teachers there. That was the failure. So it's woke smoke to deflect accountability for their own failure. And so one of the ways we dilute the woke agenda to irrelevance is going back to focusing on achievement in the school. Math, writing, reading, basic proficiency, civic education. I think every high school senior who graduates from high school should be able to pass the same civics test that every immigrant has to pass in order to become a voting citizen. That shouldn't be controversial. It was controversial when I said it, but an inspiring fact to me was just last week, a 10-year-old girl in Iowa came up to me afterwards, after the start of a speech. I called her on stage for the end of it. She showed me she had printed out all 100 questions of that civics test. A passing score is 60%. She scored 100. She's 10 years old in Iowa.
I love it.
Right? So
that's great.
We have the spirit and the capabilities in this country, but we need to cultivate that. So how do we do it in our own household? Well, look, I think that part of the reason that we have this victimhood culture spreading across the United States isn't that we've encountered so much hardship in the last 25 years. It's almost that we haven't encountered enough, right? And I think that we live in a moment where we teach our kids that hardship is the same thing as victimhood. No. Hardship is something that happens to you. Victimhood is a choice. And if you view victimhood as a choice, then it says, okay, well, what's that other choice? Hardship can somehow teach us who we really are. And so that's how we try to raise our two sons. They're young. The older one's 3.5, though he's not too young for beginning to teach this way. And I'll say this, maybe in closing, is here's the standard I want you all to hold me to. Okay, if you're going to donate to this campaign, as I've asked you to do, and support us, here's the standard I want you to hold me to in return. I want you to hold me to the standard of something that we haven't had in a president in a long time. I believe we haven't, at least for me. I want to be able to look my two sons in the eye and tell them that I want you to grow up and be like him. whoever that is in the White House, I don't care who it is, me or somebody else, I want you to grow up and be like him. I think it's been a long time since we've had a president that, at least for me, I could look my two sons in the eye and tell them that in good conscience.
Yeah.
And I think for those of you who support us in this journey, that's a high standard, but that's the high standard I want you to hold our family and our feet to the fire on. And I think that that's half the job of the presidency, is not just the policies, but it's the revival of a national character through the example you set. And, we don't take that responsibility on lightly, but I'm fully aware that that's a critically important part of the job. And whoever it is you put in that office, we put in that office, that's the standard we should apply.
Love it.
Love it.
I appreciate
Vivek,
that, guys.
Really appreciate and honor you for your journey, your ground game, really sending you blessings and support. Really thank you so much for your time today. And again, listeners, Vivek's got a ton of information online. He's done so much valuable content out there. So please do some research and visit Vivek2024.com to donate and support him. Vivek, thanks so much, brother. Appreciate it.
I appreciate you guys. Thanks a lot. And
thanks so much.
The good work.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Brother.
Great interview. Great conversation. Let's go around the table. Tell me what you guys thought. Let's start with Mikey.
Man, I love what he said there at the end, just about, being able to, it was the question that I think Matty A framed, just being able to, like, whoever's in the White House, like being able to look at my sons and say, I want you to grow up and be like that guy. I just, that was very powerful. And there's part about him that I really just want to believe. I want to believe that he'll get in there and he'll hold himself to that standard. And so I'm hopeful. Like, I'm hopeful that he's real.
Do you think he has a real shot?
Man, it's interesting what could happen. There's so much. I was talking to a guy this morning that loves Vivek. He's actually a business partner of mine. And prior to that, I was talking to Kara, and what's crazy about, like, you look at Trump and you look at Biden right now, there's so much that could happen between now and the election. Even Robert Kennedy running as an independent, like, if you've got a Trump and you've got a Biden, those two running for president, we might actually have a likelihood of some independent actually getting elected. And so I say that because there's so much that could happen between now and the election time that maybe, it kind of depends on who ends up. It might not even be Biden, but Biden might not even be coherent at that point in time. So there's so much volatility in what could happen. Yeah. So I don't,
a year's a long time when you're 80.
Is he running independent though? Or is he running for the Republican nomination?
Robert Kennedy?
No.
Yeah, he's running as an independent.
Vivek.
Well, Vivek is running as Republican. I'm just saying, I brought up Robert Kennedy because, like, it might actually be the first time ever. If you have like a Trump and a Biden run, you might actually be able to get an independent elected. And so I'm just saying, I brought that up as kind of like a benchmark against, the madness that we could be up against 12 months from now. Who freaking knows?
Yeah, I really like his, I've watched so much on him, and I think he showed up today in a way that I see him, and I've seen him on a lot of other long form content podcasts. And he's just calmer. He's more collected. It's not so fiery. It's not so flashy. And I really feel like after you do that for so long, you kind of get to see some of his real character. And that's how I feel like he showed up today. And I hope that the listener can kind of see that. And, maybe you can't quite hear it, but if you look at it and see his kind of calmness and his collected, he's coherent, he's young, he's sharp, he's got energy. He's, he's playing the ground game. And I feel like as president, just like being CEO of a company, you don't have to know everything. You don't know everything that's going on all the time. You hire really good quality people. You make good decisions. And I feel like the world that we live in is incredibly complex. It's changing, and you just need someone with fresh legs. And whether he has experience or not, I'm not sure if that really matters anymore. I think if you surround yourself with good quality people, you can make it. So I admire him for even attempting and making it this far. So I kind of just admire that and how much work it's taking out of him. And I see the purpose. I can't remember which of the guys asked that question, but I can just feel and see the purpose-driven energy come out of him, which is what is sort of attracting me to him. I just don't see that in anyone else.
You know, I really just started researching him a couple of days ago, right? When we talked about this, I know you guys have been talking about him and you guys have been mentioning it. And the idea of an independent having a chance, it's hard, right? It's hard to say, well, what will really happen with this? I was fascinated when he said he was 38 years old, right? And then the concepts he was saying, and there was a moment in there, I'm gonna have to re-listen to it to see when it was, because there was a moment when I got chills. There was a moment when I was like I was inspired, and I was inspired. Yeah. And he said, you know, now that we have a path, I'm going to ask for money for people to help. And I also got discouraged when he was like, hey, but you know, I am going to be fighting. You kind of see some of his discouragement where now he's fighting hundreds of millions of dollars of super PAC ads that are getting pushed out by other people. And you know, that fight and that battle that has to be done. So I was impressed with his answers. I think my only regret or disappointment is we didn't have more time with him. And I felt like we didn't get to really give him any hardballs, right? We didn't really get to challenge him with something else, with something that really could help distinguish it, to at least like slow down some of the negative talk. One of the things that he announced in one of the, he was at a town hall meeting. And the reason I'm going to share this is because I wish he would have been able to share it with us. And in case some people don't reach out to the other ones, you know, he was getting so much hate, and these people were saying like, hey, you have no experience. You're just another politician. And that person says, we were fooled by Trump, and now we've got another one, and you have absolutely no experience. They're like, you wouldn't be qualified to be on the school board. They named like all these jobs that legally he couldn't take. Right. And they're like, so why should you be president? You know, and the crazy thing is I admire that he's coming on all these podcasts. He's letting us ask whatever questions. Like, we probably gave him some softballs. I think that maybe we should have gone deeper into some like hard topics, but we gave him some softballs. But the fact that he was brave enough and willing to come on here, and we could have asked him anything, says something about him.
Yeah, and we didn't prepare him or his team, right, Mooch? We didn't prepare him or his team. We didn't share any questions
ahead of time. He came on, and we're like, wow, we're here. So, you know, going through all kind of those concepts and that idea, like, he's willing to go to town halls and let people yell at him and ask him questions, and he's asking off the cuff. He said it's okay to change your mind. He's getting on podcasts like ours, and he's ready for whatever question. And we're holding the recording here, so we could have said something really difficult, and he would have had to answer it. During that town hall, he's getting yelled at by these people, you know, and stuff. And it was just one after another, and half the crowd's booing. And he just said, look, I don't have any experience in government. And, but the guys that do, they owe these super PACs, and they owe these donors, and they are owned by someone else. Like, they are owned by their biggest donors. Somebody is putting tens and hundreds of millions of dollars behind campaigns. And one of the biggest problems we see with everything is then someone gets elected and they send money to Ukraine, and you're like, well, is this because of this deal, or is it like, what's really true? And in that one, he said, look, I'm my biggest donor. So like, he is his biggest donor. He is the only one that he has to answer to. And so where he lacks with governing experience, he wants to be able to make up for that by being able to say, I'm not owned by anyone though. So he's going to make the decision that he thinks is best for the American people, to where, and he spent $15 million of his own money on this thing, not to make money. He doesn't need it. Like, politicians come in with nothing, and like Nancy Pelosi, and then she leaves being worth $1 gazillion, right? He's not doing the plan that most politicians do. He's coming in worth a lot of money, and now he's going to be worth less to become the president. You know, Trump lost money by being president.
I'm glad you saw that, Mooch, in him. I mean, I feel like we could have asked him hard questions, but to be honest, there's plenty of people out there that are trying to ask him sensational questions already, and there's enough content out there. I think what we did was we asked him questions that are actually relevant to us and us as entrepreneurs, you know, and the way that he answered them, I think, is representative of who he is.
I liked his real estate answer. That made sense to me. That was like, he said, like, what can he do? He can fire 90% of the people that work at the Fed. Like
Yes.
that was an action to take of how he disagrees with the system. And I was glad that he actually jumped onto that, because I think most presidential candidates
And
won't.
also the zero-based budgeting, right? It's like,
Yep.
why is the government not run like a business? Why is it okay that the government can lose money, but a business can't survive it if it continues to lose money? So I think he's going to come in with that mindset and try to do as much as he can. And I think also sometimes in business also, you need to be not afraid of breaking things. Like you need that guy that's going to at that right time to just be that wrecking ball. And I think that we may be at that time where somebody's got to come in and break it to rebuild it, because you can't chisel. You're going to have to take a chainsaw.
Dude, that's the part I got chills. And I just got it again as you're even repeating it. He was like, if there was ever a moment like that he has a chance to actually like overthrow stuff, it is when there's like, when economies fall, when it is, we are at a unique time that it could like high pressure. We're in a pressure cooker and it could like go either way. Right. Yep. So there is a chance that it gets way, way worse, but it's also a chance for like big change could happen. That was an inspiring moment.
If you heard him say this also, is he's learning. He's adapting, he's taking new information. And I think we have to admire that, right? He doesn't know a lot. He's doing the best ground game he can. He's trying to get the most impressions and attention he can, but he's adjusting his content and his strategy as he's evolving. I don't see too many people doing that, because all these guys the rest of them are just professionals, just on repeat.
Yeah, I'm very interested to see. I just don't think he has a chance to get primary over Trump. That being said, I'll be very curious to see, because he speaks pretty highly of Trump, and a lot of his policy and a lot of his stances are very similar. I think he does a much better job of being diplomatic and respectful about it, but also being blunt and candid about it as well. I think his speaking and delivery skills are 10 out of 10. He's phenomenal there. I think sometimes too that can make it feel a little fake, or like there's a veneer there. It's almost sometimes, I think, a little unrelatable to people, even though he's really good at being relatable in some ways. So I think there's a double-edged sword with that. But I'm curious to see, if he doesn't win this campaign, what does the next 4 or 8 or 12 years look like from his perspective? And what is he going to continue to do to put more tools on his tool belt? What is he going to do to go and sharpen the axes in his chest? Because I think he could be a great candidate for many options, or for many, future elections going forward. And I loved what he said at the very end that Mike talked about earlier. I just want somebody that I can point to and be like, let's be more like that person. And we don't have many of those leaders, not just in politics, but in general with a platform, right? And I think we can point to a couple big superstars, and, whether you agree with everything they do, I think The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, a perfect example of somebody that has massive influence. You're not going to like everything he says and does, but he is a great role model in a lot of different facets, right? And we don't have enough of those types of leaders. And I would love to see our president be that type of person, because he said something that resonated with me at the end, which I think ties in with some of the points that we're all making, which was, he said, our ascent or our decline is a choice. And it made me think about not just our country, but how that applies to every individual person's journey as well. Is like, your ascent or your decline is in your hands. It's by the choices that you decide to make. And a lot of those choices are really hard choices, right? But you got to be willing to make them and to step out and be a leader and do things, whether it's leading yourself, leading your family, leading your business, leading your country, at the highest of levels. That really resonated with me. And I just love that he's very pro-America in the sense of highlighting and focusing on policy, on rhetoric, on, everything that he talks about is about this revival of our national character. And I think, whether you agree with everything America has done or not, which I don't think there's any country on planet Earth that you could go through their Rolodex of, what they've done over their historical timeline and say, I'm proud of every decision that was made. But there are foundational threads that build and create an identity and a character of each country. And I'm damn proud of what America's is. We're not perfect, but we find ways to innovate, to evolve, to get better. And I think his message has a lot of hope in it. And it also highlights a lot of the areas that I think we need to be highlighting and talking about right now. I just worry about a little bit of his polish and his veneer being a little bit too out of reach for certain everyday Americans and pulling some of those people onto his side. And then the other side that we didn't get to ask him the question that I wrote down earlier that I really wanted to, which was, him having made a significant amount of his wealth in big pharma, in the medical space, and a lot of the stigmas and things that go along with that. How is he going to use that experience to make positive change and impact for people in the areas that it's not serving them, serving our country, and addressing some of those issues. But overall, what a great land, Ash, and that was a cool experience. I want to throw a big appreciation to you for going out on a limb there and locking that interview down with him. That was great.
You think if Trump asks him to be vice, he would say yes?
Oh, 100%. I think deep down inside, he loves Trump in a lot of ways.
No.
I think I'm curious actually now why do you say that?
Well, I don't think he's a number 2 guy. I think maybe he takes it just for the sake of like the risk that something happens to, I believe Mike said this I believe that something will happen at the top 2, and the deck will get reshuffled. I think our country deserves it. If it's not even Vivek, I just feel like, come on, man, we have to move on from this 80 plus president strategy. Like we're a different world. We're a different, the way the world is today. I feel like with technology, with how fast everything moves, we just need a leader that's up to par, that's caught up with where we're at. I just don't feel like 80 plus is it. I ask everyone in my family who's 80 plus, grandmas, grandpas, whatever. I said, so could you run the HOA? Could you run your HOA? Could you run the city? Could you run a county, a state, let alone the country? And I don't care. There's sharp 80-year-old guys, but I just don't feel like our generation continues to want that I'm maybe being ageist, but there is you just want some more fresh blood. That's all.
Yeah.
That's my opinion.
I like the 80-year-old guys that are on the property tax negotiation boards, though, because they're totally a fan of the people.
Case in point, Mooch.
Yeah. You ask them. So we go in, the city says, no, we're not lowering your property tax bill. And the 80-year-old guys are like, you know what? We'll just say your house is worth $100,000 instead of 300. And the people at the city get so mad and they're like, we can do whatever we want.
Case in point.
Yeah.
Mike, what were you going to say? You think he wouldn't?
I'm not saying that. I don't have an opinion really, based on some of the things that I saw that he has said about Trump. I think if somebody, so I have 2 thoughts on this, and I'm not thinking what I think he would do, but if I'm in his shoes, if I'm truly passionate about making a difference, then I have to look at, what's my opportunity, and is being a number 2 behind someone the right thing to do for the country. And if that's truly what he believes, then being a number 2 probably is the right thing. The other side of that coin, though, when you've got a freaking, and regardless of what everybody thinks of Trump, when you got a wild card like Trump, it could be the nail in the coffin for you as number 2 that never gives you the opportunity to really make the impact that you really wanted to make, because being a number 2 under that guy could be, you might not ever even have the opportunity to get your shot at it, because he's just such a wild card. So there's a part of me that thinks, just from what I know about Vivek and listening to him, that I think he would do the right thing. And if he thought he could make an impact as a number 2, he would do it. But I just think Trump's a wild card. And I don't know that I'd want to, if I truly wanted to be the president of the United States, I don't know that I would put my flag as a number 2 behind Donald Trump. because I kind of just feel like you're never going to have the opportunity under that guy.
So, Maddie, you had mentioned being pretty sly, pretty smooth. You guys, and I saw a lot of people online post that just reminds them a lot of Obama in that sense. You guys think? Was there any like just like quick short answers? Is there like a comparison? You believe in that? Ashish?
I do, and I'll just keep it super short from the perspective of both of them have the likability traits where they aesthetically look presentable, they look good, they can be charismatic in their conversation and delivery, and 80% of what comes out of their mouth is not cringy. And so that immediately right there lowers the walls for a lot of people to get closer and engage with them in a way that, once you get really close and you got things under a microscope, you might not like everything you see, but just that initial, let me build a bridge so you can walk over and be a little bit closer to hear what I have to say. Both of them do that, in my opinion, very, very closely.
I was thinking about this earlier. If President Trump and President Obama had a president baby, I think it would be him, because there's a ton of there's a ton of like, business experience and no nonsense that you get with like Trump. But then, Obama was like a diplomat. Like he was very well spoken. Regardless of what you think, about his politics or whatever, like he represented us well. And so I think, like I literally was just thinking this earlier. He's like the perfect combination between a Donald Trump and an Obama.
Yeah. And he's Indian.
Yeah. Which is cute.
I was loving that.
You guys think that America is ready for an Indian president?
A lot more
white
than
America. Let me ask you an even more poignant question. Do you think white America is ready for an Indian president?
I haven't actually even thought about that, but if my gut answer is no. My quick response answer, I think for a lot of us and the conversations we're in and the communities we're in, we're like, yeah, we care about who is going to do the best for the job, right? Like that's our approach to a lot of it, not, if they're lesbian or gay or if they're black or white or Indian, like, right? But you hear in headline news, everything, right? It's those things first and then the role second. And so I think
that's exactly why I asked.
I think we're still in that climate where that box being checked could go against him for a lot of people. Not for me, but for a lot of people.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, in business, you would never hire somebody for all those other qualifications. You just look at who's going to do the best job and who's most qualified and who do you like.
Right, you're going to see who's going to make me the most
those other
money.
Things. Mikey, you nod your head. What do you think about that?
I'd never even thought about it. Like Aaron said, it's weird because, we've had a black president. The odds of us having a female president are probably pretty strong at some point in time. I think there's these like, I got to be careful how I say this, but like I'm Mexican. So there's these peripheral races that like, I've just never thought about a Hispanic president or an Indian president, but I just don't know that. I feel like you guys were talking about this earlier and he brought it up too. And Aaron, when you were talking about the chills and, he said hardship is something that happens to you and victimhood is something that you choose. And I think we're just at such a pivotal time right now that whether it's him being an Indian or his views or any, even back to what I said was Robert Kennedy, there are so many variables and people that are thinking about things that they've never thought about before. If it was 10 years ago, maybe the fact that he's Indian would be an issue, but I think there's so many other issues going on right now. And I think we're going to see so many more issues between now and the election that I wonder how much of that actually goes out the window and really who can unite the country. When you look at Obama winning, it was really on that, trying to unify a country around something better, hope. And I just wonder how much we're going to deal with between now and the election that is going to cause people to look past all of that because of the challenges that are going on. And I'm an optimist. And that's what I love about him too. At the end of the day, as bad as we think things are in America right now, like we are so freaking blessed. I was talking to a guy this morning and we were talking about the founding fathers and the Constitution. And Vivek said this, like, Right now, the Supreme Court backs him on a lot of the things that he's thinking 6-3. There's all these things that could come together right now that could really cause, some centrist thinking. We could really cause, people to rally around some of the middle ground stuff. And he said it too. It's this far right and far left ideology that most Americans actually just don't give a crap about. And they really just want people coming to the center. And so there's a lot of things that could play out right now that are just variables that, so again, the Indian comment, like I kind of don't even know if that's in play. And so back to the founding fathers, I asked the question this morning on a call that I was talking to this guy. And, I just think back to the Constitution and the founding fathers. And do you think that they saw a day this fast where there's 300 million people plus in America and, the things that are going on in this day and age? And I'm not saying that the Constitution's outdated, but also at the same time, I don't think that they foresaw the amount of growth and challenges. And I mean, the last 300-400 years, the last 20 years have been insane. Imagine what, has changed in 300-400 years. And so I think we're due for a serious disruption. And I was talking about this a couple pods back, but just like the fourth turning and the era that we're in, we are due for some serious change. And I'm not just talking about one presidency change. I'm talking about some deep fabric of the way that we do things in America change. And this just could, maybe it ends up being Trump and Biden. And then we have a Vivek or a Kennedy pair. You just don't know.
I want to say I don't think it's in play. It'll affect a few people, but it's not going to be the deal breaker one way or another. It's not going to be the thing that pushes it. It's not in play for me. There's not a thought. And so, but I think you're right that like it'll impact some people, but I don't think it's going to be the tiebreaker. I think it's going to be on bigger issues than that can try to get him to the table. A little quick comment, like around in this, I guess it's another just comparison to Obama and the way he is doing his campaign way unique, right? Like he is right now. I'm sure today he's doing 12 hours of like media, and tomorrow he's doing 12 hours of media, and the next day he's doing 12 hours of media. He's going to go to people's schools and online and podcasts. Like he is out there pushing.
He's pushing.
He is
playing the ground game. That's what Obama did.
Playing the ground game. And the Obama, who don't cancel me, was one of my least favorite presidents ever out there. He played the ground game different than anyone. And then he also did this really unique thing where when he was getting ready to announce the vice president, they said like, hey, if you want to figure out who my vice president is, go register your phone number on here. And then everybody registered their phone number. And then on election days, they're texting everybody saying, today's the day to vote. Like, go out. Do you need a ride? We'll come get you. Text us back. Like they played it totally different. And that was the thing that pushed it at the end. So I am hoping, hoping's the wrong word. But I do think that his unique style, if they're also like combining it with some of the CEO mindset of like lead capture and follow-up marketing and how they're going to, if he's really attacking this like a CEO campaign, he could have an opportunity to do something, different, like what happened then. So I cannot believe how many, that he's willing to come on here and let us ask him whatever he wants without screening any questions. Baffling.
That was cool. I mean, that just shows how I think authentic his campaign is, right?
Totally.
There was no I've had interviews with guests on the podcast that are nowhere close to his status that are like, oh, you can't ask this and you can't say this and you can't do this, right? And he popped on. He didn't have any of
just
that
to give.
And it was like he knew us. When he popped in, it wasn't like an intro, anything. He's like, okay, let's go.
Just to give the listeners, we've been in contact with his team for like 30 days or so, asking for this podcast. And they didn't prep him. We had to submit what we wanted to talk about, or like our podcast and our profiles and all that. I don't even think that made it to him. My gut tells me as he was coming on, he was probably looking at the email.
Like, who are these dudes?
Who are these dudes? And he just came on.
One of them's Indian. It's okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Ash was our token Indian guy got us in the door, baby.
I'm glad we talked about the cultural thing. I also, in my life, in my circles, I also think our country has moved past that. But there's maybe part of the country that hasn't, and I wouldn't necessarily compare him like him and Trump like is the option him or Trump yet. I think it's just like, what are we ready for as a country? And, you know, can we make the choice that's good for us when we know we need to make a better choice? I think that's kind of what I get worried about is like,
So
do we know what's good for us?
I know who you're voting for, Ashish. We do know you've definitely played your cards here.
One of the things I would criticize him on, or maybe I'm concerned about, is his international policy, his China policy. You know, I don't know too much about his policy on Israel and all that, but like, he's so anti-China, and the rhetorical language in which he uses his communication about China, I think hopefully it's just trying to get votes and trying to get that favor. But I don't think, in my experience, in my business, yeah, he's done business in China too, but I just don't think it's realistic to just have a perspective of us versus China.
And that's the one area that when he's been on debate stages, he has shown kind of his greenness to foreign policy. And, you know, some of the career politicians who actually do have some chops in that area walk circles around him. So I agree with you on that point. I also think one of the things that was important, and this was more of a call to action to you, the listener, every individual, is he said, whether you like politics or not, politics likes you. Whether you like financial freedom or not, it just made me think of like the things that matter, whether you care about them or not, are going to make an impact in your life. So you should care, right? Like you should lean in, you should educate yourself. You should have some of these conversations. You should be critically thinking around these things, whether it's in politics, whether it's in business, it's your family, like whatever it is. I think that was a really important point that stuck out to me. I was like, there's too many people that are like, I can't make a difference. I don't care about that. No, you should care about that. And that's the type of attitude and approach that has really put us in this position where so many people feel helpless and hopeless, is because they don't feel like they have a say, right? And so I think it really is important now more than ever to lean in on those types of things, because it really is going to make a difference, not only in your future, but your kids' future and future generations.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, people are afraid of talking about politics anymore, right? Because it's so controversial. You don't want to talk about politics with your best friend because you don't want to get in a fight. So I think what I like about him too is he's taking the temperature down, even on this podcast, right? Like trying to have difficult conversations about things. We're trying to set the example of how can we have conversations with people you disagree with. Mikey, why don't you maybe bring us home here, my friend?
Well, I like what, in fact, when we were positioning whether it was Ash or Maddie to ask the last question, I threw it in the chat. Like, you know, I wanted to hear his take on being all over the world right now, China, Russia, Israel versus focusing on us. So I think, I think I want to circle back on that. I mean, at the end of the day, I've said this already, but I mean, I like the guy. I think there's just a lot of entrenchment on both sides. I'm not predicting it, but honestly, if we came down to a Trump Biden, I think we could maybe have an independent party run here, and that could get really interesting. So Maddie, what you were just talking about too, like I'm very hopeful in what you just said, that people realize, I think with everything that we've been through the last 4, 5, 6 years, like I'm really hoping that people will understand that, you know, we do have a voice, we do have a say. And like you said, things are going to impact you, whether you want to believe it or not. And so the reality is you can bury your head in the sand, or we can get out there and do something about it. And, you know, I think the extreme right, the extreme left, like I said, they're really loud, but there's a lot of people in the middle ground. I think it's a majority of Americans that are not red. They're not blue. They're not Democrat. They're not Republican. They just really believe in, you know, America. And I'm hoping that's what we see in this next election.
Who's coming on the podcast next? Who's getting Nikki Haley? Who's getting Robert Kennedy?
I think we need Robert Kennedy.
I would love Robert Kennedy, man. That would be great. Let's
figure that out.
So
manifest it.
I think we need to go do that. You know, I think we need to reach high, because I don't know, there's Tim Ferriss in one of his books, he writes about like this college professor did a thing this year, like the first year, and said, whoever can get like the most famous person in class is going to win like an all expense paid trip to Hawaii or something, right? The first year, no students do it because they believe that someone else is going to do it instead, right? And then they find out that last year, if anybody would have turned in one person, they would have won that free trip. So the next year, people went for it, and they got like somebody got Oprah, right? Like they're like it was like people went and found some of the most famous people out there. So I think that like Ashish, you've shown us this. We need to reach. We need to get some people on here. I think it's time to get more to come on the show.
I'm gonna do you guys a solid. I'm gonna get Kamala on, okay? And we're gonna have a great. What? Why are you guys laughing?
Play your hand for who you vote for. Get Kamala Harris.
I love it. I love it. Well, this is another kick-ass episode of the King's Table. What a day. What an episode. I think we just set a new bar for ourselves. Not in just the fact that we interviewed a potential presidential candidate, but just the dynamic nature of what this podcast could become. So it's just super important. You as the listeners, if you guys are enjoying this, if you're learning something, keep giving us feedback. You can see we're having so much fun here. This is going to organically take its own life. We're having so much fun. We're learning so much. So continue to give us feedback. You can find us on all our Instagram handles. You can text Maddie's phone number, which is in the show notes. But leave us comments, leave us feedback, and remember to subscribe to all our podcasts and leave us a review on our podcast. But thanks so much, guys. Great episode. Hope it helped you think about your role in life, in business, in politics. So much fun. Peace.
Wow.